Hello and welcome. This is Mouse Gunner, and we're back with some more Automation, the car company tycoon game, continuing on with the campaign roleplay of the Edison Car Company in 1991. We're going to be continuing on with yet another engine build, this time the Asteroid, which is our pickup. And for this build, I'm going to be using the engines that we've already built, the engine families we've already built, and just making variations of those. There's various reasons for me doing that. First off, to bring the engine that we used in our previous time periods, the inline 6, into the modern era, we would have to upgrade that to fuel injection, as we've been doing with all our other engines, and I honestly don't think we can afford that expense. We're having to do that with all the other engines that we either brought over from our previous production or the brand new engines that we're having to spend money to produce. I just think that's too much expense, and we have to pare things down. There's another reason we have to pare things down, is because at this point in time, we're starting to come to the realization that these American car companies can't do business the way that they have been doing them in the past. Things aren't like they were in the 60s and 70s, where you use these giant production complexes to build everything in-house. Just as an example, I live in the Cleveland area, and there was a massive engine production plant right near the Cleveland airport. Now, at its height, this production plant had 3 factories that all specialized in just producing engines for the most part. That's all they focused on, was producing engines. Nowadays, only one of those factories is still in operation. The other 2 factories have over time been shut down. Now, most of this has happened much more recently in time, but just to show you how big these facilities were, as each of these factories were closed, one of these factories by themselves was so large that no business could possibly utilize the facility as it was. So these facilities were bulldozed, and then the land from that facility was then parceled up into several blocks, because again, no business could use that amount of territory, and you had that threefold. Now, it's not just American car companies that have this problem or had this problem. You also have this problem in Europe. I've heard a few stories about some European manufacturers. If I remember correctly, Citroën had a problem with this, with very large facilities that they're only using a small amount of the capacity of that factory anymore with the production that they do, and to maintain such a large facility that you're only using, let's say, 30% of, is not really a good idea, and it's not really good for business. So that's something that we're going to have to start transitioning to, paring down the number of engines that we're building, paring down things like that, so that we don't have these large production, or we don't require these large production facilities because the cost to maintain those anymore is too much. We're not doing in-house production like they were doing in the 50s and 60s anymore. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into what we're going to be doing. So we're probably going to be using for this this build a V6, our V6 and our V8. Now, for the V6, I don't think we're going to make a variant. I think we're just going to use the standard variant, which is also used in the Star. As I don't really know how much I could really improve on this without making too many drastic changes. And how better off we'd be with those drastic changes, I'm not sure. Now, the Constellation has a variant, but that is set up first off with a higher quality fuel, but also set up to be quieter and things like that. That is more appropriate for the Constellation. Well, when we jump into our V8, though, we will be making a variant, because the only variant that exists right now is the variant that is going to be going in our Constellation. So again, we have that same dynamic of an engine that is quieter and has a little bit better fuel quality. So let's go ahead and revise this engine, and we'll make a version for our Asteroid. So we're going to clone the current version. We're going to be making a number of changes to this version. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the compression, and we'll probably bring this down to 8.5 to deal with, maybe even down to 8. And that's still going to be knocking, so once we switch to our regular fuel, or it'll be just on the borderline. Yeah, it's knocking right now. So we'll bring that down a little bit more to 60 ignition timing. So that's one change we're going to make, down the lower quality fuel. The other change we're going to make is in the exhaust. So we're going to change it from dual reverse flow mufflers to a single reverse flow muffler. This is going to save us on weight. It's going to make our engine a little bit louder, but I think we can contend with that in a pickup truck. I don't think that's as big of an issue. And I'm going to switch it from a dual exhaust system to a single exhaust system. This is also going to save weight, and we're going to obviously need to change the exhaust diameter to a different number, which it looks like 2 3/4 is where we need it to be. Okay, so those are some of the changes we're going to make. We're going to try and look at some of the other aspects of the engine and things that we might want to do with it. So let's see what happens if we switch this to cast and hyperprotectic. So we have a little bit of problems here with reliability and also knocking, because forged pistons give you a little bit more fuel octane to work with. I think we're going to keep everything the same here, mostly for reliability's sake. Now, cam profile. It is already pretty tame in that cam profile, which is kind of what we want with what we're going for. But now that we've changed a lot of other dynamics, it might be a good idea to change this around as well. So it looks like we can actually do with a little bit more cam profile without really messing up where the power comes in too much. Matter of fact, a little bit more aggressive looks like it does us a little bit of good, because it looks like going up to 36 is a little bit better for us. And we can now play with ignition timing a lot more with that change. Of course, that's going to change where things comes in, so we may have to change things back. Kind of a game you play. All right, so that looks like a little bit better. So we're at 62, which is where we were before. We have a little bit more aggressive cam profile, only 1 point difference, really, honestly, but pretty close to where the other engine was set up as far as everything goes. Now, there are a couple tricks we can do, though, besides what we already have set up. One thing I'm going to want to look at, though, is where is our peak power or performance index coming in. It looks like it's already set for that, so we're good there. Another trick we can do, and this is to give us more torque, is we can restrict our exhaust diameter a little tiny bit. This will lose us some horsepower, but in trade we'll gain some torque, which is exactly what we want with the Asteroid. We're looking for a little bit more torque, a little bit less horsepower. So that's exactly what we're getting by doing that, and that's what I'm going to do. So that being said, I think we've made our variant. We didn't have to make a lot of changes in this video, which is honestly good. The less changes you have to make, the less strain you have on your production. So we'll call this the 5.0 A variant. And honestly, I don't know what other vehicles will be using this V8 in. I imagine the Comet will, if it's using a version of this engine, a very much modified version of this engine. So that's one thing to consider. But more or less, I mean, more than likely, we're going to be using a different engine for the Comet. And the satellite wouldn't use a V8, so I don't see... Well, actually, we don't use V8s at all in the Comet, now that I think about it. We've been using V6s. So yeah, this wouldn't be used in the Comet. It wouldn't be used in the satellite. And those are pretty much our two main models left. So as far as I can tell, this is going to be the last of the V8 variants. So I think it's fine putting that little A designation. We'll go ahead and save it. And let's look at what we've got and the changes we've made. So let's sort things a little bit. So the main engines we'll be using in our Asteroid would be the engine that we already made in our previous video with the Star, which comes in with 145.6 horsepower, 162.7 foot-pounds of torque, and loudness, it's a little bit quieter than what we're going to be using. So we have 232.8 horsepower, 276.1 foot-pounds of torque. So we're not quite matching what we got out of this engine with the Constellation, but you have to keep in mind the Constellation had a lot more compression ratio. It used better quality fuel. So that's going to be a lot of the differences here. If we did the same with this engine, we would probably easily match these numbers. But we're trying to keep costs low, running costs of this engine low. So that's a lot of the reason why we're doing some of the things we're doing. Responsiveness is about the same between the V6 and the V8 that we'll be using. It's a little bit worse than what we get out of the Constellation version again, but we kind of explained why that is. Loudness, it looks a little bit louder than our V6 version, but that makes sense. Smoothness, it's a little bit more smooth. We have production units. It's less than the other variant, which is, again, what we want to see, but obviously a lot more than our V6. But that, again, is what we want to see. We want the V6 to be our more affordable option. And then our actual cost, we see a similar dynamic. We're cheaper with the Asteroid version than the Constellation version, and the V6 is obviously the cheapest of them all. Reliability comes in at 62 across the board, so that's good to see. We want to see nice bulletproof engines with our pickup truck. Economy numbers were a little bit worse than the Constellation version, but again, a lot of that is because of the fuel quality and the advantages we can take from that. And we are also percentage-wise a little bit better than our V6. But again, V8s, I don't know why in the game they always are very fuel efficient for what they are. It seemingly doesn't make a whole lot of sense considering how much more of a displacement we have going here. I mean, 5 liters versus 3 liters. But that's the way the game does it. But you have to also take into account the difference in weight, which is 581 pounds versus 391 pounds. So obviously, when it comes down to it, because this car, once you put this engine in, will be lighter, you'll probably get a little bit better fuel economy in the end. So that's pretty much that. And again, we're a little bit lighter than the Constellation version because we used only one muffler and we used single exhaust rather than dual exhaust. Even though our exhaust is bigger around, using a single exhaust is going to save you a fair amount of weight. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Mouse Gunner signing out.